My name is Stephen Reid. I'm the founder of the Psychedelic Society. I'm a scientist by training. I studied physics and then complexity sciences. Then went into the world of climate activism, worked for a bunch of different NGOs, including Greenpeace, 350.org. And at some point during that era, I discovered psychedelics. I had my first psychedelic experience with 2CB at Shambhala Festival and became fascinated with those substances from that point. So mushrooms only came a little bit later for me actually, but I certainly appreciate that there's an extra kind of magic when the psychoactive substance you're ingesting is a living being, or at least it's come from a living being. So psilocybin mushrooms have a very special place in my heart, in my life, in my mind in these days. So we'll just start with a show of hands of who has taken psilocybin mushrooms before. Okay, wicked. About 80% of people. Who thinks psilocybin mushrooms have encouraged them to change their behaviour or attitudes towards climate and environment? Yeah, some not. And finally, who has met someone new today at Fungi Fest? Oh, that's pretty good. But for me, this is always one of the most exciting parts of these kind of festivals. So just in 60 seconds, I'm just going to invite you to turn to the person like behind or around you, someone that you don't know, and introduce yourself and maybe say something about your experiences with psilocybin, or if you haven't yet tried psilocybin mushrooms, why not? or whether you have any plans to. Yeah. So I'll just give you 60 seconds to do that before we get going. Yeah. Thank you. What am I going to talk about today? What are psilocybin mushrooms? What is a regenerative society? Why do we need a regenerative society? How can psilocybin mushrooms help? And a vision for the future. So what are psilocybin mushrooms? It depends how sort of far back you want to go, how deep you want to take this question. And I thought let's answer that question by going, all the way back to the Big Bang. So 13.8 billion years ago, 10 to the minus 12 seconds after the Big Bang, that raw seething mass of energy, or whatever it was at that stage, cooled into quarks, which are the smallest known subatomic constituents. 10 to the minus 11 seconds after the Big Bang, we have the first protons and neutrons form. It took around 100,000 years for the first molecules to come together. And it wasn't until 150 million years after the beginning of the known universe that we had the first stars. 4.6 billion years ago, so switching to a different time frame now, I'm now talking about time ago rather than after the Big Bang, our own sun formed. And it wasn't until about 60 million years later that the Earth formed after the sun. 3.5 billion years ago saw the emergence of life on Earth. So it took about a billion years of the Earth having formed for life to appear. And at least another 300 million years to have photosynthetic life on Earth. The split between plants and animals in the tree of life occurred, I only recently discovered this, 1.547 billion years ago by the best estimate right now. And at that point, fungi and, I should say plants on one hand and animals and fungi on the other. So animals and fungi are actually more closely related to one another than either of us are to plants. And then the split between fungi and animals occurred 1.538 billion years ago. So there was a period of, you could say we're more closely related to fungi than plants by about 9 billion years, which is, a long time in the human life scale, but on cosmic time scales, it's, not so much perhaps. Psilocybin mushrooms, I understand, only evolved in the last 10 to 20 million years. Psilocybin, it's speculated, was evolved because it dampens the appetite of insects. This is relatively new research, and is intended to put insects off nibbling too much of the mushroom. So let's see. Modern Homo sapiens, 300,000 years ago, we've been behaviourally modern for about 50,000 years. Agriculture popped up about 10,000 years ago, and more or less from that point there is some recorded use, ritual use of psilocybin mushrooms by humans. There are some cave paintings in both Spain and Algeria dating from around that time, not long after that time, that suggests humans had started using psilocybin mushrooms for so-called entheogenic purposes. Let's see, writing appeared about 3,000 years ago, 3,000 years before Christ, the alphabet about 2,000 years before Christ, and that's the point in time at which knowledge of this stuff really started to spread, I suppose. I missed a couple of cool things on psilocybin mushrooms and just skipped over them. There's more than 200 species of psilocybin mushroom. A few ones that are particularly well known and cultivated by humans, the Psilocybin cubensis, the liberty caps in this country, the wavy caps also growing all over recreation grounds in Tottenham. I discovered that a couple of years ago. Yet fascinatingly, scientists speculate that the gene set for synthesizing psilocybin actually passed between mushrooms through horizontal gene transfer, which is quite an unusual form of passing DNA, usually found in bacteria. But the different types of mushrooms that do produce psilocybin are actually not very alike. So this is one of the pieces of evidence that suggests that horizontal gene transfer was involved. So there you go, that's your introduction to psilocybin mushrooms in sort of cosmic history. What is a regenerative society? So we might compare a regenerative society to a degenerative society or self-terminating society if you take the degeneration to its conclusion. We also might compare regenerative to sustainable. And some other words which help me with that, we might think of degenerative as depleting something, sustainable as maintaining something, and regenerative as encouraging something. So what exactly are we talking about encouraging in the context of a regenerative society? Well, I think at its core we're talking about encouraging the complexity and diversity of life on Earth. That's to me what I mean when I talk about regenerative society. And the two basic conditions, well, actually for sustainability, for a sustainable society even, but certainly for a regenerative one, you might say, are that we've closed the loops and it's appropriately rate limited. Now, depending on how far out you take your view of space and time, all loops end up closed. But at least on human timescales, and then closed loops, we're talking about that we've basically eliminated this idea of waste, trash, throwing away. There is no away. Newsflash. I mean, most of you probably understand that here, but a regenerative society doesn't throw things away. It understands that all wastes must be the input for some other ecological process. And it's appropriately rate limited. What does that mean? It means a regenerative society, in my view, seeks to eliminate, as far as possible, the use of all non-renewable resources and the dumping of any wastes which are not able to be processed in the environment on anything like a human timescale. At the very least, you would say you would deplete non-renewable resources no faster than you can discover renewable alternatives. And then for renewable resources, we're only using them, consuming them as fast as they are able to replenish themselves. And I think it's pretty clear that our current society is a degenerative one, is a depleting one, that by no means are we meeting those two conditions in all kinds of areas of industry and agriculture. So yeah, I think the difference between a sustainable society and a regenerative society is actually quite interesting. And one thing that I thought of, and actually I would appreciate your thoughts on this topic later, is that a regenerative society, whilst it's aware of the maximum rates it can consume and harvest and use natural resources, it deliberately chooses to not push it all the way up to the limit and leave some of that for other purposes, other species, even spiritually regenerative even, and there can certainly be other forms of regeneration. Just a note on an economically regenerative society, it has some, when I put it into those three boxes, there's some quite interesting parallels with different forms of interest on money. I would argue that positive interest on money, which is the case for most of the money that we have in the world right now, actually corresponds to a degenerative society. Interest makes money dead. It encourages people to hoard money and not spend it. You might say zero interest society is that threshold, that sustainability. And then there's this idea of demurrage. Anyone come across demurrage? It's negative interest. So the idea that money, a stock of money loses its value over time. So if you're aware that you've got 10 quid, but by the end of the day it's only going to be worth 9, the sensible thing to do with it is spend it as soon as possible. So by adopting this demurrage paradigm where money loses its value, which is actually nature inspired, right? It's as if everything in nature decays. If money also decayed, we would see, or people would be used to the idea that money only has value when you're using it, when you're spending it on stuff, rather than simply like keeping it and trying to use it for your own protection and security, which I think is a rather shallow notion of security, but that's become quite deeply embedded in our society. Okay, where should we go next? So why do we need a regenerative society? I mean, really what we're asking there is, why does it matter if life on Earth continues? It's an interesting question, not least in the context that in about 10 to the, so going to the end of the universe now, we started from the beginning, in about 10 to the power 100 years time, even every proton in your body, which is the most stable subatomic particle there is, will have broken down into quarks again. So we will just be left, which are the constituents of protons themselves. What's more, all of the heat in the universe will have evenly spread out, and we will just be left, scientists believe, with this totally uniform black sea of quarks. Everything is breaking down, everything is decaying, even at the most fundamental level. So given that everything shall surely die, I mean, like, does it matter if life on Earth continues another billion years, 100, who cares? Well, I think you care, and I certainly care, yeah. But I think I do believe it's a very personal contemplation, if you like, and it's up to each of us maybe to play with some of those kinds of thought experiments and to internalize the deep truth of impermanence, which is a teaching found in, wisdom traditions all across the world, and decide for ourselves that, it is worth getting out of bed in the morning and hugging a tree or whatever it is that you might be able to do that day. So, now, I'm just going to do a time check as well. Okay. How can psilocybin mushrooms help? Well, first we maybe need to question a little bit more about or acknowledge the different ways in which they can help. Psilocybin mushrooms can be looked at as medicines, Probably most people here are aware of the amazing research that's going on at places like Imperial College London and Johns Hopkins University, studying psilocybin for a treatment for depression, for anxiety, for OCD, for PTSD, for all kinds of debilitating mental health conditions, and they're producing amazing results. It's looking increasingly likely that maybe as soon as 2021, psilocybin medicines will be available by prescription from GPs for some of these conditions. That's enormously exciting, but it's not the full story. Psilocybin mushrooms can be considered entheogens. People familiar with this word entheogen? Hands up if you've heard this word entheogen before. Oh, some. So it's actually the word psychedelic, which literally means mind revealing, or sometimes soul revealing. That psyche is variously translated as mind and soul from the Greek. Came about, I think it was in the 50s, and the word entheogen only sometime later, I think in the 70s or maybe even early 80s. So entheogen literally means finding God within. And I think it's quite, the difference between psychedelic and entheogenic, or psychedelics and entheogens, is subtle, but I think actually quite useful and important. Psychedelic has come, is relatively context-free. I should say that they basically are referring to the same class of substances, of plants, if you like, mushrooms. But yeah, with the word psychedelic, it doesn't tell you too much about how that substance, plant, mushroom, is going to be used. So a psychedelic trip could just as easily happen at Glastonbury Festival as it could in, like a medicine hut deep in the Amazon in a very ritualistic setting. When we talk about entheogens, it's much more associated with ceremonial, ritual, deliberate use. You wouldn't so much. You can't so much accidentally have an entheogenic experience, perhaps. But for me at least, there's something that alludes to the ritual, ceremonial context, which I think is useful and important. The sacred context, you might even say. So another way of understanding psilocybin mushrooms, probably the most far out of the three ways that I'm going to suggest today, is as communication devices. Are they a way for human beings to actually enter into some kind of communication, conversation, dialogue with the fungal world? Some people think so. In various indigenous societies believe that to be the case. So, let's first talk about the uses of entheogens. Psilocybin mushrooms, and actually entheogenic plants and mushrooms more generally, have this remarkable ability to reliably induce so-called mystical, spiritual type experiences. Now, the concept of mystical, spiritual type experience was actually invented, came about in the field of psychology, of religion, outside of the realm of psychedelics, because some people have these experiences just walking down the street and then boom, something happens and it forever changes their life. So it has this, at least in the original sense, it had this six-fold criteria: the sense of unity and interconnectedness, the sense of sacredness, a sense of uncovering some deeper truth about reality, a sense of peace and joy, a sense of transcending time and space, and finally a sense of ineffability, that there remains something about the experience which is difficult or even impossible to put into words. So if someone has an experience, any kind of experience, whether involving plants, mushrooms or otherwise, where they felt a number of these characteristics in a profound way, then we could say they've had a mystical, spiritual type experience. Arguably the most common and kind of the basis for that experience is this sense of unity and interconnectedness of all things. And people describe that happening on different levels, that feeling a sense of profound connection to people around them in the room, or it might be to the land that they're on. it might be to the planet itself, or it might even be to the universe and all that they know and believe exists. And it's that sense which often, or is indeed correlated in peer-reviewed studies with shifts in people's attitudes towards nature. If people start to believe they are at one with nature, that they are at some level, there is no separation between themselves and the natural world, it encourages them to pro-environmental behaviour, to take care of our living planet as if it were themselves. I think that's one of the reasons that I'm fascinated by these substances. I think they can be extremely useful at this time of climate and ecological crisis. And over the past, year actually, more or less now, Gail Grabberek, the co-founder of Extinction Rebellion, and I have done a number of public conversations on the topics psychedelics, extinction and social change, where we've been musing on the potential use of psychedelics, and particularly psilocybin mushrooms, to induce some kind of ecological awakening in society. And the man right down here at the front, Sam Gandhi, will be telling you more about that very soon, I believe. 3 minutes, wow, okay. Time flies. So, also connected to that, these profound entheogenic experiences, is this deep sense of mystery, of people realizing, wow, there's way more going on out there in this life, in this reality, than I knew before. And that also, I think, is quite important at this time, in the Anthropocene, in this time of climate crisis, when it seems, if we're honest, and I think it's important to do the reading and realise that we're in a really, really fucking bad situation. And it seems like whatever we're going to do now, billions of people are going to die earlier than they possibly hoped and expected. And things are going to get very, very tough for many, many people on this planet, no matter what we do. Despite that, these kind of entheogenic experiences teach us that there's more going on than meets the eye, and there's more going on than current science can explain. Now, I'm not saying that, because these psychedelic entheogenic experiences with psilocybin mushrooms allow us to understand that science is incomplete, that does not mean we should then go and ignore the climate science. However, for me and for many people, it does seem to just add something, give us that extra little bit of, dare I say, hope even maybe. And one way of understanding that is that, for me, at least in a poetic sense, is that we're not alone, that humans deeply desire, increasing numbers of humans deeply desire and are taking action for the complexity and diversity of life on this planet, but I have a sense that mushrooms, fungi, and plants, and the rest of life on this planet also desires its continuation. And that's sometimes the sense that I get when I'm communing with mushrooms. They're like, come on, we've got to sort this shit out, otherwise we're all going to die. And I think that there are some powerful allies out there in ways that we don't usually contemplate or understand. So I'll just end with a vision for the future for this regenerative society involving psilocybin mushrooms. I think it's amazing all the research that's been done with psilocybin, and I hope it is available in medical context sooner rather than later. But to experience their full entheogenic potential, we need new mystery schools. We need new temples. We need places where people can take psilocybin mushrooms in deliberate ways for spiritual purposes, for mysterious purposes. And this is, it's only actually been for the last couple of thousand years that we've been, maybe even less than that we've been missing such institutions. For the vast majority of human history, they have had mystery cults and mystery schools and so on, and that seems to me like a very important missing piece to reclaim in our civilization. People are familiar with Aldous Huxley's novel Island. He wrote Brave New World, which was a bit of a dystopia. Island was the more utopian one, and there he talks about the moksha medicine, which sounds a lot like psilocybin mushrooms, and young adults, I think when they're 18, they take themselves, there's no teacher that goes with them, they take themselves up a mountain and co-create a ceremony involving the moksha medicine as a kind of coming of age ritual. And is that so crazy? I mean, what do kids do when they're 18 nowadays? They sort of like go and get wasted like down at the nearest pub. I think that like doing a co-created psilocybin ceremony sounds like a much better idea to me than anything that we currently, accept. But this, I hope in the future there is a lot more growing of psilocybin mushrooms. And actually, this doesn't have to. This is possible right now. Despite the draconian drug laws in this country, it is legal. Psilocybin spores are legal. Well, let's say at least for microscopy purposes. So often you find them sold on the websites that also sell microscopes. I'm not sure how many microscopes they ever sell, but it's like makes legal sense to like put some available there just to cover their backs. But you can legally order psilocybin spores to your home. Who here dares to admit that they've grown psilocybin mushrooms? Yeah. I think in this time of ecological crisis, this becomes almost like, for me, like a moral imperative and it's an activist act, if you like. Yeah. I think anyone that has the ability and the privilege, actually, both in money and also race and class and all the rest of it, to be able to grow psilocybin mushrooms in a way which means they probably aren't going to get caught and they aren't going to create any significant trouble in their lives, I think should be doing that. As much as we should be out on the streets with Extinction Rebellion tomorrow morning, which I will be. Yeah, anyone else again Extinction Rebellion tomorrow? Yeah, a few, cool, there's still time. I just end with that reminder and that and planting that seed, planting that spore, that we have incredible opportunity to just be getting on with this stuff. We don't need a change in the law, we just need to get our shit together and start ordering those spores, educating ourselves with the really rather basic knowledge of how to do this. And in fact, you can actually buy like super simple to use grow kits. There's mushbuddies.com and Psilocide with CYLOCYBE.com. I think it's .com, you can Google them anyway, which are my two favourite places to purchase the spores in the appropriate growing kit. Let me know how you get on. Send me an email, send me a photo of your psilocybin mushrooms and tell me something about your trip. They're extremely powerful substances. They absolutely should be used with extreme care and caution in an entheogenic setting, as I've attempted to describe. So please be careful. But do take them. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Left for Q&A.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions, I can bring around the mic.
Hello. That was a really exciting, passionate chat. One thing I was really curious about in terms of like advocating broad and individual use of psychedelics, personal use, I guess is like, do you suggest particular protocols for? I guess I have loads of personal experience with friends having like permanent psychosis based on use of psychedelics, and so I guess like that last note about how to be careful or being careful, but maybe what are the methods in which you would advocate also being careful in your use of psychedelics?
But don't worry.
I'll first say, if you're in any doubt, the Psychedelic Society, the organisation that I founded, runs psychedelic experience retreats. These currently happen in the Netherlands, because in the Netherlands there's a type of psilocybin truffle, sclerotia, that's legal. Mostly they happen for 4 days, and on the daytime of the second day, the group, which is usually 15 people and 3 trained sober facilitators, the 15 participants take the psilocybin truffles under the care of the trained facilitators. And we've been running these for about 3 years now. We've run more than 60. We get incredible feedback on them. We've had certainly no instances of like ongoing psychosis. So they are one great option for anyone, certainly maybe for the first time, or if they haven't taken them for a long time, who wants to kind of make steps into this world. And by doing one of these weekends, you will see the whole process of how we create the safest container that we possibly can, the optimal container, so people can have the deepest experiences. There is increasing amounts of good stuff out there on the internet. There's about to be a new online course launched called the School of Soma, which is combining both online lessons on mushroom growing and also how to create a psilocybin ceremonial space, which I think is super exciting. There's a lot to say on that topic, and I'm happy to speak to you about it more, but one place to begin looking is the psychedelic experience retreats.
Any more questions?
I think it's quite interesting what you said about people not caring when you ask if people really care about what's the way our planet is going. I think from my experience, people who do psychedelics already have maybe a bit of a disposition towards understanding that there's maybe more beyond yourself than what is sort of taught. Do you think that psychedelics can break down the barrier to the people who maybe don't already have that knowledge and maybe are in a space where they don't care what happens to the planet and they're quite sort of fallible in the thought that, it's not up to me, or who cares, or...
I certainly believe that psilocybin mushrooms and other psychedelics are exceptionally contextual substances, if you like. Stan Grof, a famous psychologist, described them as non-specific amplifiers, that they will intensify the context and the meaning of whatever space in which they're taken. That is both kind of their physical environment and also our mental space. So, if we can certainly say that they offer much greater potential benefit for ecology, environment, if they are taken with some awareness of that situation. And it's, at its simplest, I would say that simply means taking them outdoors. In my experience, is often enough for people that previously professed no particular connection to nature, the wild, the environmental crisis, to have a certain level of awakening of like, okay, well, everything's alive, man. And like, I hadn't really thought about it before, but yeah, maybe we should take a bit better care of it. And another word, and I guess the climate and ecological crisis increasingly is a context in which none of us can escape. Like, you've kind of got to have been living under a rock to not understand that like some serious shit is going down in that regard. And so that is that is another perspective on like that there's potential for that to be amplified, given that I believe it's permeated at some level, at least, the consciousness of so many of us. Setting context is really, really important, and those of us that desire the continuation of life on Earth can seek to create and encourage ceremonial ritual spaces that maximise the possibility of people feeling this deep sense of connection to the natural world, and thus changing their environmental behaviour.
Thank you. Okay, so that was the last question. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Thank you very much.